So in this video, we're going to pick up where we left off with JavaScript functions, and the next thing we're going to discuss are arguments. So we've seen how to write a function like sing-song, which does the same thing every single time. Every time we write sing-song, as you can see here, it just calls these 4 lines of console.logs. But what if I wanted to have a function sing-song that could sing a different song? So maybe it could sing Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, but it could also sing Three Blind Mice and Mary Had a Little Lamb. And I wanted to be able to call sing song and tell it which song I wanted it to sing. Or here's another example. If I had a function called say hello, and it just console.logged hello. If I wanted that function to be able to say hello to a specific person, I wanted to personalize it so that I could call say hello with Jeffrey and it would say hello to Jeffrey. I could call say hello with Sally and it would call say hello with Sally. So to do that, we need to talk about arguments. So arguments are how we can write functions that take inputs. So far our functions haven't taken any inputs, but here's an example of a function called square. And what it does is it takes a number, any number, and then it console.logs the square of that number. So the syntax to say that a function is expecting something to be passed in, that it's expecting an argument, looks like this. Rather than just empty parentheses here, we put the name of an argument. So in this case, we called it num. And this can be called anything at all. It's just a placeholder. So whenever the user calls square and we pass in 10, num is going to hold the value of 10 temporarily. If the user calls square with 3, num is going to hold the value of 3. And then we can use num inside of the function. So in this case, console.log num times num is just going to take whatever number was passed in the parentheses and square it. So as you can see, here's the examples. Square 10 prints 100. Square 3 prints 9. Square 4 prints 16. So let's go ahead and write our own function to illustrate how we use arguments. So we're going to write one called say hello. So function say hello. And to start, it's not going to take any arguments. It will just look like this. And then inside of here, I'm going to type console.log hello there with exclamation point. And that's all our function will do for now. And let's make this a little bit wider. I'll hit enter. And now I can run say hello. And that's all it does. So next, I want to define a function called say hello that takes a person's name, and then it says hello there plus the person's name. So to do that, I'm just going to redefine say hello. And this time, it's not empty parentheses. I'm going to put something in here. We can call it name or person or user. I'm going to go with name though. And now I'm going to write console.log hello there, and then I'm going to add in name, just like this, and then I'll add my exclamation point at the end, and then close the parentheses. So as you can see, name is just a placeholder for whatever value we pass in, and then we're going to console.log hello there with the name in the middle and then an exclamation point. So to call this, we now say hello, and then a name, like Rusty. Then we get, hello there, Rusty. And this time I'll do say hello, Charlie, or say hello, Mary. And you can see that our code changes. Our function has adapted to whatever value we passed in. So the use of arguments is what makes our functions super powerful. So on a website like Facebook, there might be a function called make homepage, and that make homepage is going to take information as arguments about the user who's logged in. It's about making a little machine that can take in an argument and then spit something else out. Also, we're not limited just to one argument. On this slide, you can see that our functions can take multiple arguments. So here's an example of a function that calculates the area of a rectangle. It takes a length and a width, and then we just multiply them together, console.log length times width, and then to call this function, we just pass in two numbers separated by a comma. So the first value corresponds with length, the second one corresponds with width. So it just comes down to the order. So if I switch these two and I put 2 first, 2 would be length and 9 would be width. So here's another example where we have 3 arguments, person 1, person 2, and person 3, and then we just say hi to all 3 of them with separate console.logs. So let's copy this one and I'll just demonstrate it here. So I'll paste it in. And now if I call greet with 3 names, Harry, Ron, and Hermione, the order dictates who is person 1, Harry, who's person 2, Ron, and who's person 3, Hermione. And you can see that those values are placeholders, and we get hi Harry, hi Ron, hi Hermione. One other interesting note is that I can write a function that is expecting an argument, like greet, but if I leave those arguments off when I call it, so if I just do this, Harry and Ron, and I leave Hermione off, I would never do that, by the way, because Hermione is my favorite, but if I did that, you see I get hi Harry, hi Ron, and then hi undefined. So it doesn't break my code, I don't get an error message, but what happens is that person 3 is just left as undefined. In some programming languages, this would stop everything and throw an error message. In JavaScript, it's totally fine. It just means that you might have to watch out and check if something is undefined or not. So arguments are one of the important pieces in functions that make them really, really useful, because it's not only about shortening up our code and repeating the same chunk of code every time, like twinkle, twinkle, little star. It's also about making that code change a little bit depending on some inputs. So here are a few examples of when we might use arguments in a real web app. So imagine that we have a web game, and in that game there's a score for every player. And the player can do things that can increment that score or decrement that score. So if a player does something crazy, we might have a function called add to score. And if we want to give them a lot of points, we would pass in 100 points. If a user died, we might subtract 100 points. And if we want to award just a few points, we might do something like add to score 5. So here's another example. Imagine we had a site that had user login. So we might have a function called check credentials, and it would take 2 arguments, an email and a password. So we might pass something in like rusty@gmail.com, and then a password like woof123. And then check credentials would take that email and the password, and it would check them and make some decision. So there would be probably an if statement in there. It would check if they match correctly, and if they did, then it logs us in, else it shows us an error message. So those are just 2 simple examples, but we'll be writing code like that later on in this class. The ability of functions to take arguments is one of, if not the most important part of writing functions. It's not just about repeating code, singing the same twinkle twinkle little star over and over and over. It's about repeating code that we can also change a little bit, that we can have some variables in. So arguments empower us, they let us do that.